Pastor Ackery,
Yes.
do you know what today is?
Tell me what today is.
Today is the beginning of the election cycle.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, officially, petitions will begin to be circulated, so we are about to be bombarded.
All of the political animals are coming out.
Yeah, they are. But you know, the last election cycle, the most watched race nationally was the Illinois States Attorney race.
Yes, it was.
Yes, it really was. You know, that was when the Laquan McDonald case was being talked about all over the country. And there was a dash cam video that the city sat on.
Sure.
And it took then State's Attorney Anita Alvarez an entire year before she actually began to prosecute the case.
This case was, it caught the attention of America. Young man was shot 16 times.
16
In fact,
times.
you know the old saying, 16 shots and a cover-up. 16 times.
Yeah.
And police officers who were on the scene, they lied on police reports.
They did that.
They lied and corroborated
It's
a
been
story
reported.
to protect Jason Van Dyke. It was a murder. It was a murder. And not only was the mayor's hands tainted with blood, but the state's attorney's office as well as the police chief. And you know by now that the police chief lost his job, and certainly Anita lost hers. Bye, Anita. She's gone, and now we have Kim Foxx, and we're so happy to have her.
And let us just say that Ms. Kim Foxx, our state's attorney, won by an overwhelming majority.
Yes, she did. She defeated the status quo, and now the people have a voice.
That's right, and we're looking for similar victories this election cycle. Now listen, those of you that are watching, we would really love to hear from you. The call-in number here is 312-738-1060. So please give us a call. We would love to hear from you. Pastor Ackery,
Yes.
as we get State's Attorney Kim Foxx seated, would you like to let everybody know, give everybody an update on Keosha White?
Yes, sure. Keosha just received a message from her. She was on with us last week, and she was one of the many that had to experience so much adversity during a hurricane. What's the name of it? We had so many lately.
Harvey.
Hurricane Harvey. And certainly she's doing much better today. And she's at home. She's back to work. And we're going to get some reports from her real soon. Next week we hope to have her on. So let's continue to pray for her, and we're just excited that she was able to come on and give us a report from somebody who was on the grounds. So welcome. We're so excited to have with us Miss Kim Foxx. She is here today. She is in the studio. We are super excited for her. You won your election in 2016 with an overwhelming victory. It's clear voters wanted systemic change, particularly as it relates to investigating police shootings. Anita Alvarez's practices was always to grant impunity to police officers, irregardless of the circumstances. People wanted change. People wanted some real justice. Now I want to ask the question: can voters be assured that they're getting the change that they voted for, Kim?
First of all, thank you, Pastor Ackery, for having me on the show. I am big admirers of both you and Doris, so this is an honor to be here with your audience. Certainly, the issues around police misconduct were a big theme in the 2016 election.
Sure.
And one of the things that we were immediately faced with when I first took office, December 1st, was back in January, we had an officer-involved shooting with an off-duty police officer that happened on January 2nd. And what we did was recognizing the need to act quickly. Justice must be swift to get
Absolutely.
out and work with the Independent Police Review Authority, not for them to finish their case, but to work parallel to what they were doing. In that particular case with an off-duty officer, we were able to have outside investigators help us work up the case and charge based on the facts, the evidence, and the law. We believe that we had enough evidence to charge a first-degree murder case, and that case was charged within 14
And that was
days.
unheard of. Many people were really stunned and very appreciative of it, because it seems like you were making a statement it was not going to be business as usual.
Yeah, and we wanted to make sure, that we're charging cases where we think is appropriate. And certainly politics should never play a role either in not charging cases and dragging your feet or rushing to judgment. And in that case, we did our due diligence and said that this was a case we should charge. A month later, we had a case with an on-duty Amtrak officer who shot someone in the back as they were fleeing at Union Station. Again, we assembled a team to help us investigate that case in parallel to what was happening administratively with Amtrak, and charged first-degree murder charges in that case in an on-duty shooting within 9 days. Again, because the evidence and the facts and the law lined up where that was the appropriate action to take.
Absolutely. Listen, Attorney, you seem to be earning your votes with the new laws that impact bail reform. Many of us, as community leaders, Doris and I were talking earlier how it's just a travesty how some people end up in jail for an extended period of time for a bond that's $1,000, $700, and it's a nonviolent crime. But on the other hand, you have people who have engaged in white-collar crime and theft and sometimes murder, and they're walking the streets. So I appreciate your commitment to that. I know this gets complicated, but without talking or taking too much time, can you succinctly explain the different aspects of the new bail reform law? I know it's tough.
I love it that you asked a lawyer.
Give me some layman's terms.
You know I'm a lawyer. You said keep it simple, Fox. So basically, most people don't understand that jail is where you go before trial. Prison is where you go once you've been found guilty.
Sure.
And so when you are going before a bond court judge, there's a presumption of innocence. We hear this in school, you are innocent until proven guilty.
Sure.
So most people who are in our jails are there before they even have their day at trial. And so when we look at the people who are in our jails, you would assume that most of the people are there because they're violent. They've committed a violent act.
Sure.
And what we found was that we had a lot of people who were there for nonviolent offenses and were given bail amounts, an amount where a judge says, you pay this so that you can get out and come back to court. Sometimes $10,000, which means you have to post $1,000 to walk.
Yes.
So you have people who were suffering from drug addiction, who had $20 worth of drugs in their pocket and had a $1,000 bond. They don't have $1,000. And so some of the things that we did was first look at who's in our jail, not because they're a threat, but because they're poor. And we started with a population of people who needed just $1,000 to get out and hadn't paid it. Some people sat in jail for 3-4 months for low-level offenses because they didn't have $1,000. And we work with the sheriff and we work with the public defender to identify them to go into court and ask that they be released on what we call an I-bond, on their own recognizance.
So if a person has to place $1,000, basically you're getting a waiver to some extent.
That's exactly right. What we saw was if you were there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and when we were looking, like, why are you still here?
Sure.
On a retail theft, we had one man who sat in jail, Pastor, for 3 months for stealing $300 worth of goods. Now, we're not saying, and he's accused, not yet convicted, we're not saying that we want people to steal, but the question that we have to ask, if this person was stealing $300 worth of goods, and it costs us $160 a day to house them in our jail. If he had a job, if he was in the community, if he was helping out a child or a parent, what good is happening with that? And when we looked, he could not afford the $1,000 to walk.
Now, I noticed with this particular law, I noticed Dr. Willie Wilson has been out here advocating for laws similar to that. Can you comment on that?
Certainly. So that program where we were asking for people to be released was a joint effort that was not with the change in the law. What Pastor Wilson did, having seen this...
Dr. Wilson.
I'm sorry, thank you. And he would be the first to tell you. Dr. Wilson.
Although he loved to preach sometimes.
Yes, baby. Dr. Wilson will tell you that he saw this on TV, and he was giving amounts to bail people out.
Sure.
And he was surprised at how long their cases were still pending. So what he did was he went down to Springfield and advocated for a law that said that there should be a presumption that we're not asking for bail in some of these low-level offenses. And he got a bipartisan group of folks, both Republicans and Democrats, to come together in a rare time in Springfield for bail reform. So Dr. Wilson is to be commended for that.
So he did make some some headway with this.
Yes, he did.
Very vocal and viable. 312-738-1060. We have the one and only States Attorney Kim Foxx. She's here in the studio. Listen, what is the I-bond? Can you talk about that? What is the I-bond? Is it true you have to have a nonviolent offense to qualify for I-bond?
So the bond statute that judges have to use, there are two main factors that they have to consider for any bond, whether it's an I-bond, which means you get to be released without posting any money, or a monetary bond, which means you have to pay a bail. In any instance, a judge has to make two big determinations. Are you a flight risk? Will you come back to court? Are you going to take your passport and go to the Mexican Riviera? Or are you a danger to your community? Is your background that, show that you've had violent offenses? Even if this offense isn't violent, have you had violent offenses in the past? If neither of those are the case, the presumption should be that you are released without a monetary bail, an I-bond. That is the presumption that's in the statute that judges should follow. And so what we were finding was we had a lot of poor people, or one population homeless. We had people who were stealing soap, stealing food. And they'd get a court date and they wouldn't come back for their court dates. Well, the problem wasn't that they ran out of town. They're broke. They couldn't get from the north side to 26 in California. They couldn't get from the west side to 26 in California. And they were given bonds that were so high that they couldn't get out. And so I-bond should be about risk and flight.
Gotcha.
That's it.
Very good, very good. We have a caller. Welcome to the show. You on with States Attorney Kim Foxx. State your comment or question real quickly.
Yes, the name is Dolphin Norris. I want to ask Ms. Foxx, first of all, congratulations. I'm so grateful that you're there. Second question is you talked about when you ran that there's such inequity and representation of employment at the State's Attorney Office. I think it was like 800 and something assistant state's attorney, and less than 80% of them were Europeans, and the rest, or 90% even. What efforts are you going to make and coming out to the community to encourage our youth of all ethnicities to get into the legal field? You talked about that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the first things that we did was we hired our first ever chief diversity officer in the office. And that she has been tasked with making sure, one, that we recruit talented people, African Americans, Latinos, Asians, across the board, that we have minority representation in recruitment. Second, we don't want you to just get in and get entry-level positions. We want to make sure that in the highest levels of leadership that we have diversity. So we have, our senior leadership, our bureau chiefs. We have an African-American man who runs our civil bureau, who does all of the litigation on behalf of Cook County. We have an African-American woman who's our deputy chief of our criminal bureau, which is our largest bureau in the office. We also made sure that we had supervisors of color, both Latino and African-American, in our suburban courthouses. Markham, for example, is the second busiest courthouse that we have in the network, and we have an African-American woman there. Maywood, we have a Latina who's out in Maywood because we have Berwyn and Cicero, and populations that are heavily Latino, and wanting to have people in positions of leadership there. So
that's really good.
Yeah, very
I've been in a couple community meetings with you, and just to see an intentional effort by you to diversify your office has been really impressive. Listen, time is moving real quick. I want to ask you a question. One of the people who had a great influence on you, Cook County President Toni Preckwinkle, she's been taking a beating lately in the media about this new sugary beverage tax. Just want to ask your opinion about this tax. Can you give some interpretation from the perspective that you see it?
So we are the lawyers on behalf of the county, and so I won't get into the merits of the tax because it's still being litigated. There was a lawsuit filed by Irma. What I can tell you, having worked in county government before, is that the revenues that we get for the county pay for resources like my office. And one of the unfortunate things that we had to do just in July as a result of some of this ongoing litigation was let go of 17 attorneys. And for me, regardless of where our revenue comes from, I have a mission to advocate on behalf of the public safety of the people in Cook County.
What is your response when people say that's a poor people's tax because the health issues impact the poor people the most? What's your response to that?
You know, I generally stay out of that conversation,
Sure.
largely because I left working for county government and leave it up to the experts
I hear you.
who do that. But what I do tell people is that, you know, we have to pay for the resources that we expend. And in a time of increased violence here in Chicago over the last 18 months, we can ill afford to let go of assistant state's attorneys because we can't finance our office. And so, as I said, the county board and the county commissioners and the president of the county board will have to debate the merits.
I don't
of the
blame you.
text.
I would stay out of that as well. 312-738-1060. Doris had a question I thought was very important for today's discussion. Does the state's attorney office have any jurisdiction on how students in middle and high school are punished? Because recent reports reveal a disparity in how suspensions are issued between blacks and non-black students.
Yeah, it's a great question. What we know from the research is that when they talk about a school to prison pipeline,
Sure.
the kids who are having discipline in school have a higher likelihood of ending up in our juvenile court system. So we don't have jurisdiction of inter-school discipline. What we have been trying to do, however, is looking at those schools that have high incidence of referrals to juvenile and asking, do you have the resources to do something where you're not using the courts as a discipline model?
Sure.
And what we find, schools that are well-resourced, you know, schools like out in Oak Park, out in Evanston, out in Skokie, have restorative justice programs in the schools. In some neighborhoods where we're barely getting kids the ability to have books, our librarians, they don't have those investments. And so when things jump off, they might instinctively pick up the phone and call police or do a suspension. And we're trying to get schools and administrators to be more thoughtful about that, because in the long-term interest of public safety, it doesn't make sense to criminalize behavior that are discipline issues, just knee-jerk, and not look at the long-term effects that it has on our communities.
Yeah, what really bothers me, State's Attorney, is the fact that so many African-American youth, they get blemishes on their lives early before they can even really get started.
Right.
And so hopefully your office can look at ways where we could try to bring an end to that, because it's certainly, the disparity is glaring.
That's right. And it's for African American boys and girls.
Sure.
I mean, one of the things that we see is African American girls is the fastest rising population in juvenile. And again, from incidences that arise out of school. And so I've been very vocal. It's one of the reasons I talk about my education in Chicago public schools and how fortunate I am. I'm not better, I'm not greater than anybody else. My school didn't treat my behavior like a criminal.
And let me just tell you this, because we run out of time. You have a great story. You have a great story, and man, I'm very proud of how you have been resilient, how you have used your experience not as a stumbling block, but as a stepping stone to your success. Real quickly, in 30 seconds, could you just tell us your story?
Yeah, very
in
quickly.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Child of Cabrini, you know, teenage parents. Father went off to college. Mom stayed behind to raise my brother and I. Victim of sexual violence as a child, homeless in high school. And what's really important, those are high-level struggles.
Sure.
Is that I am not, my resilience is, I've been fortunate, but there's so many kids just like me,
Absolutely.
Pastor Acker, who are being killed on our streets every
Sure.
day, who are turned out into human trafficking every day. My story could easily be so many of the young people that we see. I have to tell it so that I make sure that we have policies that protect young people so they have the same opportunities. It's not because I'm special. All of those babies are special.
That's right.
And we have to treat them as such.
That's right, and we certainly appreciate you coming in, just giving your story and giving your vision for what you want to do in Cook County government. One last thing, you were voted in overwhelmingly by the black community. What is the most important criminal justice issue that's facing us at this time, in your very humble opinion?
Yeah, I think we have to look at the incarceration rates in the black community.
Me and Doris, we did it again. All right. People will not even believe this, but we said that would be the number one issue, and
That's right.
we appreciate any effort you can make to help reduce it.
That's right.
All across the globe, it seems like blacks are targeted for mass incarceration. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, and we got to do something about it. For every person that's used in our our system, that's somebody, that's a mother, that's a father,
Sure.
that's a child. And it has an impact not just on the individual, but communities.
That's
So
right.
when you look at some of our communities where we've spent more money on incarceration than investment in economic opportunity,
That's right.
it's backwards. And people who don't have opportunity to work are more likely to engage in behaviors that not make us safe. So we got to invest in that.
Let's invest in jobs. Let's
right.
invest in education.
That's right.
Because we learned under Bill Clinton's administration, locking them up and throwing away the key does not work.
That's right.
It does not work. So listen, we're just so excited about you coming in today. We got to have you back because we did not get through all of our notes because you're a great interview, and we just appreciate you coming in today. I know you're very busy. Go back and keep on fighting for us. And we believe that if you keep working hard like this, your responsibility will increase. Thank you so much for tuning in. Doris and I will be right back at you next week. Thank you for watching. All hands on deck. See you next Tuesday.